All right, folks, we have Tiger Lane number 3 coming at you. The theme of the day is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Don't fix it.
We're going to show you kind of how a break gets established and the things that kind of need to happen in order for that to take place, but also how to establish a break without having to put in like a massive peak sprint effort. And then after that break gets established, we'll talk about why Bryant ended up back in the group after being in the break. Mm-hmm. And then we'll talk about how to use a preem lap in order to then relaunch into the breakaway and get back into a podium position.
Should be a fun one.
This is a good one.
All right, let's rock and roll. So here we are. Same crit course, obviously. Tiger Lane number 3. This time, if you missed the last one, I did a bunch of jumping around between videos. In this one, I'm going to keep it as the B-Fun cam is the main cam, Sanford cam in the top left there until we get near the end, and then we're going to end up swapping those out, and you'll see Sanford throwing down late. But in this race, we had a new guy, Chatlong.
Matt Chatlong.
Lives in Oxford now, I believe, Oxford, Mississippi, but from Northern California. He was a guy who raced for Mike's Bikes. We knew he was solid, great sprinter from what we, a little bit of research we did. So we were worried about him. Little Rock guys are back. They always race hard. They got some big engines, so we know they like to try to get into the move and are willing to chase stuff back. Peter Reed for Grind City. He's here. He's always an animator. And Justin Lowe, he came down from Dover, Tennessee.
Breakaway extraordinaire.
For sure. Always a guy to watch. And so race starts out. We got what? One off the front already.
It didn't start as hot, I would say, as the last two.
Yep.
But we kind of just started throwing. I mean, everyone, as usual, started throwing punches early. But
in this race, I was trying to be more patient early. So I was trying to stay, as you can see from the video.
But it never works.
Staying a little further back, allowing, so you don't have to do as harsh of accelerations as you would if you're up near the front or if you're trying to cover stuff early. We had a few of our guys, Cat 3s, who were going to be following stuff. They'd already raced earlier.
This is called impatient.
And this is Sanford not being patient. Sanford's already going off the front there. Sanford, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I just thought it was too easy. The race was, if we were going to get a break established, the race has to be hard. And so the goal here, and I hate when people say, let's just go make the race hard and see what happens. But if you have a team and you have people that can win and can ride a breakaway, you have to keep it hard long enough for the standard chasers to get tired, so then your breakaway specialist can launch.
Yeah.
So it was just too easy. It was the first 1-2 laps was just too easy. So
yeah, eventually someone's got to start throwing some punches, right?
Yeah, and that was the goal. And I mean, I barely made it at half a lap, and then someone else went over top. So that was goal achieved. It started to get spicy, and you'll see the result here in a little bit.
Yeah, so those that aren't familiar, that's Dale in the bottom left there. We are the red, white, and blue team. Mark Spensdorf, BPC. And, we had, 6 people? I think 6 or 7 people in this race. Yeah. So we made up a big chunk of the field. Russ, we didn't mention Russ, out from Denver.
Oh, and Lee Yarbrough.
He was in town. Lee Yarbrough, yeah, he came over from Middle Tennessee. So there was some strong folks. This was actually a big field. With some strong folks. So we got Rollins going up the left side there. Again, our goal is to stack the deck like we did in race number 2. So we want to not only keep the race harder, we got to keep people in the win, people burning matches early for a break to be successful late. But you can see here, this is one where, ordinarily not really stacking the deck. If Rollins is off the front, we got Little Rock that's going across there in the green. We got Richie Schlegel for outdoors. We only had one of the 3 initially, but I was trying to be patient there and say, okay, who else is going to chase? Is there anyone that's going to chase? And Lee ended up just being patient and letting Lee come to the front, he ended up closing that gap down. So saved a match, caused him to have to do work. And so now I know, okay, he just covered that little move, and now he's attacking again. So I know he's going to be kind of tired by this point. So even if he gets up to Scott here, who's off the front, he's putting in a big effort. Like, I'm doing 350, 360 in his draft there for a bit. Like, this is a big effort to get across. And this is where, what do we want to do once this move comes back?
I mean, generally, you want to go over the top. If everyone's tired, send another person to keep it hard. He kind of pulled through and just kept riding it. It was strung out, behind you guys. So, I mean, if you watch the top cam, it was pretty strung out, like that whole chase. So keep in mind, like, it's rare. It's pretty rare that the first 2 to 3 breaks actually stick.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they have to happen in order to make it hard enough for one to actually stick later. So, if you're on a team, you kind of, to some extent, know that your efforts are in vain.
Yep.
But,
yourself. I mean, you're kind of a sacrificial lamb,
your
right?
personal efforts are in vain. So, but it pays off in the long run.
Yeah. And there's times, if you go back and watch the first crit, it was the very first move that ended up sticking with Peter and Taylor. Yeah. So sometimes it does work. Sometimes you may be the person who's in charge of covering moves early, but sometimes that gets you into the break. So here we got good numbers again. We're keeping the race hard. We're keeping it the pace high. Anytime there's a little gap like this, I'm happy with the numbers that we have up front there, so I'm not going to be the one closing it down. I opened a little gap there. Russ in the blue and black, he ended up having to close it down because I was going to be more than happy to let that open up, and I knew there was other folks that would not be happy with that. So always be thinking as a racer, like, what's in front of me and what's behind me, and if the folks behind you are not going to be willing to let a big group like that go, you can be patient. You can cause them to burn matches, just to get back up to the group. So you don't have to attack off the front to cause other people to work, just by, allowing gaps to open where it makes sense strategically. If you've got numbers in front, I'm always kind of thinking to myself, if that move, if whatever people are in front of me were to be up the road, am I happy with that as a breakaway? And if the answer is yes, then I'm more than happy to let a gap open through a corner.
So this is like up on the left, my second attempt at a breakaway here with Justin Lowe. Like I said, he's always, you can count on him trying multiple times to get a break established. So he kind of pulled me up to Newberry, and we had another one already. He was kind of, the whole group kind of came up, and another move immediately went over the top.
Yep. So we sent another guy right over the top. Again, you can see some separation there. Justin. So he just did that move, right? So now we know Justin's got to be tired. So that's who Dale's locked onto right now in that top left. There's a gap opening. He doesn't want that to go. He doesn't have any teammates, so he's got to be in it. And we're using that to our advantage. And you can see he's standing, he's kicking.
He's pushing.
Dale's putting a big effort in just to be on his wheel. So catalog that, right? Okay, now we know he's tired. If a break goes over the top, would we expect him to be the one to chase that down?
No, and see, it would have been an opportunity to go across, but, I mean, one, I was tired, honestly, just kind of following that move, doing the initial move and then following the secondary move. And I had a feeling that you were in my wing there, about to go across to this one.
Yeah. So that's one where I just didn't want the pace to slow up. Of the people that were left, Justin was one I knew who was strong. So I wanted to keep him on the back foot too. So that's part of the reason I tried to put that little dig in as soon as he sat up. Didn't cost me a lot of effort. It wasn't a huge match that I had to burn to do that. But it was a way to keep pressure on him.
It doesn't have to be. That is the most opportune time to accelerate on a budget, and get a gap on a budget is when it's been hard and the person in the front sits up.
Yep. And we're going to see here shortly. That's exactly what happens. I don't put in a 1500 watt spike, largely because I don't think I can put in a 1500 watt spike. But I end up getting into and establishing the winning move essentially, and it was from just a 700 watt effort. So here we got Delaney going off the front. He was guest racing with us, strong dude. He had just won the 3-4 race earlier in the day. Sanford, you're working your way up into position. Solo guy, are we happy with that?
No. I mean, we're cool with it, but we're just going to see who kind of pulls us across to it.
Yeah.
You know, anything that goes, we'd try to have at least one on it, and then we would essentially have two in the break, you know, at least two in the break.
And this is one of those situations where, like, I kind of expected people to chase harder initially. Delaney ends up getting a pretty big gap here. Justin eventually is like, hey, I'm not happy with that going, and everyone just sitting up and letting it roll, because he knew we'd be happy with letting a solo guy go, but only if no one's, you know, if everyone's going to let him get a massive gap, we're fine with that. But ideally we want larger numbers, because it is tough for one person to stay away when you do have, you know, a lot of strong folks still in the field. I think for us, one of the worst case scenarios would be solo guy goes off the front, stays out there until 2 laps to go. It all comes back together, and now it's a bunch sprint. That's something we generally don't like to happen, because there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong in a bunch sprint. So we can see after about a one lap slowdown, a little over a lap, the pace starts kicking back up again. And I'm just sitting back there. I mean, essentially I've done that one effort, and besides that, I've pretty much been following wheels the whole time. So I had plenty of time to kind of get the legs revved up, plenty of time because of the attacks of my teammates, and Dale covering moves and Dale being aggressive early. You know, I was able to essentially save the legs.
Folks are chasing pretty hard right now. I mean, you can tell by the single file. Again, the Little Rock guys are always willing to put in big efforts to pull stuff back. So, you know, a lot of times I just kind of let them ahead of me, and they would close it down, and I wouldn't have to work all that hard.
Yep. And that's something where if you can identify those people in a race, or if that's where like a race series like this, where you end up racing against the same people quite a bit, you can kind of get a feel for what their habits are. The folks that are willing to chase, who are happy to chase, have the legs to chase. You can kind of get a feel for who they are typically riding for. But yeah, it's been hard. It's been strung out now, and so that's always like spidey sense.
Yeah.
Time to get ready.
I kind of accelerated up to this group that was kind of off, and then everyone sort of sat up, and Justin kind of came through, so just kind of jumped on him. I probably coulda, woulda, shoulda looked back a little earlier and seen that there were a lot more people behind me than I thought. Mm-hmm. But it put me in good position just to kind of like slide over to this next move instead of actually having to like put in a big dig to get in a break.
And now this is something where, so I put in a little effort just to make sure we had numbers in this little move. This is where Little Rock guy ends up opening a gap. And so Dale, like by this point in time, I mean, how are you feeling? We don't have heart rate going for you. But essentially you covered Justin, you jumped across to this move, and now you're on the front chasing down Peter.
Yeah, it wasn't
and
on
by this point we got the group back on us.
Yeah, it wasn't on my best legs that day in general, but yeah, after doing a couple of moves there, I didn't want to be the one pulling Peter back, and I mean, I just figured at some point somebody was going to come around to bridge that gap, so I was just kind of riding pretty easy. I mean, he's opening it a little bit, but I was kind of thinking that someone else, but I think we have the biggest team, so people are going to count on us to close a lot of this stuff down. But we also have a strong enough team that people can bridge pretty big gaps.
Yeah.
So I was kind of counting on somebody, Newberry or whomever, to jump that and go across to it.
Mm-hmm. And Newberry timed this well. So, when everyone else is expecting, if we miss the move, that's why we never want to miss it, because now we're the ones that have to take responsibility for bringing it back or going across to it. Newberry did a good job with timing there. He attacked before the corner. It allowed, you were up on the front. So by attacking, being the only one to go through that corner with you on the front, and then I kind of snuck in there too, it allows him to open a gap without as big of an acceleration as he would have had to have done otherwise. So he used the corner to make sure he went solo, which is good. And with having us up near the front, it allowed him to know that he wasn't going to be dragging anyone with him. So this is where the break actually ends up happening. So there was that hard effort, and
everyone sits up.
As soon as I see people looking around too, like if I see people looking around, like, oh gosh, what's next? That's the best time to go.
And you like peaked out at like under 700 watts.
Yeah, it was like 750. It wasn't that. Yeah, it wasn't that big.
That was just a few hard pedal strokes.
Yep. And it was just carrying momentum. That front was going far slower because they all set up. Little surge, carry momentum. But this is where we want to highlight. So Rollins comes through right away. He essentially says, we got a gap, let's go. And this is where it's like, you got to bury yourself. You don't pace yourself for like, okay, it's 16 minutes in of a 60-minute race. I need to pace myself for 44 more minutes? No, you're pacing yourself to try to get a gap as quickly as you can, and you have to break the elastic behind you. So you can't wait for someone else to come through. Like, you can't be expecting. So in this situation, Richie Slagle's with us with Los Locos, like right there. In general, if we were all taking even pulls, I should not be second in line right here. But a little gap was opened, and I can't wait or play games if I want this gap to get established. So Taylor takes a good strong pull, and I'm about to come through again. So this will be, I did the initial surge right here between corners 1 and 2. I took a pull through the back end of the stadium, kind of to the start-finish or towards the start-finish stretch, and now I'm back taking, another pull. And it's a hard effort. And, we were averaging over, I think, right around 30 for 2 laps.
At this point, the gap really wasn't that big, too.
No.
We were trying to, we were jumping on anything that kind of went, which is what we needed to be doing. And when we found ourselves on the front, just kind of sitting up through turns and trying to let the gap establish quicker, but people were really trying hard to chase. Nobody wanted this to go away.
I knew it was going to be alarm bells for everyone in the group that was, that missed it, that was solo or that they missed it with their teammate. I knew there was going to be hard efforts right away. And it's like, okay, if they're pushing hard, we need to not only push as hard or harder, but we need to also make sure we're working smoothly together. And we're not, because I knew you guys were going to be back there sitting up anytime you were second wheel and someone tried to flick you through. So I knew if we could be smooth and if we could just keep the gas on for, 2-3 laps, that there was a good chance we'd get it out to 15, 20 seconds. And we actually ended up building it pretty quick once we got through those first two laps.
There were a few instances where things went and we in the back would even just slight moments of miscommunication, and the person who was attacking got way more of a gap than they should have because we thought the other person was going to cover it. And then we would have to work a little bit harder to close that back down, which wasn't a big issue in the long run. But it's just in the back, everyone has to be talking. And if you're tired, you end up telling other people that you need a break, get up front, cover some moves, take your break, and then find yourself back toward the front to be able to cover moves again. That's how the break stays away.
Yeah. So in this situation, what ends up happening here shortly is we have this 4-person move, right? So 3 teammates, myself, Taylor, and Scott Rollins. So we got 3 guys with 1 solo dude who's got teammates back there, so we know his teammates were going to be working. Question becomes, should he be working or should he not be working in this situation? And here's my thought. I mean, people come from different schools of thought, but all the responsibility of establishing the gap should go on the group or the team with the numbers. So this break is definitely most favorable to us because we've got 3 of the 4 people in it. We want it to succeed, right? We've got 3 teammates, and we know that later on we can use team tactics to attack and counterattack Richie. So in my mind, the responsibility to establish the gap is on our team. So if he were sitting on and doing no work while we get that gap out large enough to where we're pretty sure it's going to be successful, that's on us. But at that point, it's on him to make sure he's showing that he's going to work and not play it tactically in the group. Because the one way we could mess this up would be drag him around the entire race, have him fresh. We've been taking, above threshold level pulls.
Yeah.
And we let him go fresh to the line. He's a strong guy. Like, there's no way we want to take him fresh to the final even 2 or 3 laps. So he's taking pulls, but he's also, by this point, that gap is over the whole length of the start-finish stretch. So we've got a big gap now, and this is where, in my mind,
it's more than that, but yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, we're
half a lap
ahead now.
Yeah.
I mean, so that happened pretty quick. So from here, it's like, okay, he needs to be taking even pulls with us, and this is where I had pulled, and he ended up opening a gap, and I was like, no, I'm not. I've already done extra work in this, and we've allowed him to skip pulls already. But at this point, with the gap big enough, I'm essentially saying, hey, you got to take even pulls from here on out. And then, another gap opens here. And so I jump across to it. I think it would be fair to say Richie was not real happy with our tactics being played out so soon in the race. So I essentially go across to Taylor, and now there's no rear camera here, but Schlegel's bringing this one back with Rollins on his wheel. And we're not up here killing it. You can tell by the power. We're not.
Don't mind us in the back, just taking on attack after attack in attempts to try to get across to you guys.
But yeah, so what's going to end up happening here is you're going to see Scott and Schlegel come into view, and they're not really happy with how things are playing out. Schlegel's not happy that he's being attacked. And then he and I have a conversation for a few laps. And here's essentially, what I told him. In his viewpoint, what he wanted was us to work together until a couple laps to go, and then he knew the attacks were going to come. During our conversation here, I was saying, well, hey, I need you to take even pulls. We're not going to drag you around, like I just was saying. We're not going to drag you around, and there's no way I'm going to drag you around to 2 laps to go, and then, even if you're taking pulls, like it's just a not safe thing. And I was saying, hey, let's go even pulls. We can still possibly get back up to that group. Or I was saying, are you happy with 4th? Like, if you cut a deal, this happens as well. Like, if you're a solo rider and you make a breakaway, I mean, are you happy with last place from that breakaway, or would you prefer it reshuffling and taking your chances? So, not everyone likes to cut deals like that, which is fine. But, it's something that does happen. It's commonplace where if you're like, hey, this is probably the best I can end up doing, the best our team can end up doing. So this is where Schlegel and I we stop discussing our each other's tactics. And we start actually taking pulls together. But by this point in time, I'm like starting to look back, and it's like all we're serving to do is we were holding even with the group in front of us.
You guys were rabbits at that point.
Yeah. I essentially end up telling them, I'm like, hey.
The people in the group thought you guys had blown up and we're falling back, and now everyone tastes a podium spot that's still available.
Yep.
So the chase got harder at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I ended up telling him, I was like, hey, all we are now is a carrot to the group. Like I'm not I'm not working anymore. And so now I'm back in the group. So it's okay. What's our goal now? Our goal is to make sure what you guys have been doing all along. The goal is to make sure nothing else goes up the road. We want our 2 guys that are off the front to essentially make sure that they're secured in the top 2 spots on the podium. So I'm going to start doing a little more covering here soon. And you can see we've got it kind of fast forwarded. There's attacks, there's counterattacks, there's us chasing. But such a healthy margin off the front that we can even start thinking about a secondary move going, right? So once you start getting down towards the end of the race, so we're 43 minutes in of a 60-minute race, like we can start thinking about, okay, what about a second move? Like how can we secure that third step on the podium? How can we sweep it without it coming down to a field sprint, ideally? So you can see it's been strung out. Anytime it's strung out.
There's been a few splits. It's strung out. I
Yep.
mean, it's not just cruising.
And then this is where preem lap. So we talked about at the very beginning, like
They call a preem lap.
preem laps are a great
Prime time.
Yes.
Preem time.
Preem should be prime because it's a prime time to, some people are going to go for the preem. And a preem, essentially, if you're unfamiliar with racing, the first time watching a criterium, a preem is essentially they give you an award, a prize, money, beer, socks, whatever it is. There's some sort of award for the first person across the line that next lap.
On that lap, yeah.
And for this, it was a field preem. So it was not for the guys that are off the front.
Yeah.
It was only for the people in this group.
At this point, everyone's kind of looking at each other. Nobody wants to, lead this lap out.
Yep. And this is where you got to be thinking, okay, some people may just be going for the preem. Other people, and this is where I look at Newberry and I say, noobs, right here. You can see him kind of look at me. I said, go over the top of this preem. That's the move. It had been hard. Everyone's getting a recovery right now, but there's that confusion. You're seeing people sprinting for it. You don't know that some people may be using that as a launch pad.
Yeah.
A lot of folks are like, oh, they're just sprinting for the preem. We're going to catch them. They're going to sit up after the finish. Great time to attack. And we're going into 7 laps to go, 6 or 7 laps to go.
Yeah, it's pretty late, so it's even more of a reason to use it as a launch pad.
So Richie, who'd been in the break with me, that's him on the front. He said, seeing the douches.
Yeah, I mean, it was he kind of went, and then, Newberry was kind of prepped to go over the top. I was pretty tired at this point.
Yeah, so Newberry actually ends up in a bad spot here, right? So there's the finish line. He was going to go over the top, but essentially the gap opened to Schlegel, and then you and Little Rock guy, I think, right, had both kind of sat up. So he ended up being on the front. So you can't really go over the top when you're on the front.
It's hard.
So I just essentially did what I wanted Newberry to do and went over the top.
I mean, the best laid plans usually don't happen. You think you know exactly what's going to happen with the preem lap, and you can see it in your head, and it all works out great. But there's so many things that can happen. But if someone else is thinking the same thing as you, they can kind of take over that plan if they're in a better spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the key there is I did not want that to go to waste. I didn't want that opportunity to go to waste this late.
Yeah, it was a hard effort.
Sanford, you're kind of stuck chasing Peter again here. It looks like
Yeah.
you've been in the wind for a while now.
Yeah.
And Newberry ends up going over the top. So I'm peeking back in these corners. There you go. You can kind of see where I peek back. The gap was pretty darn small right here, and it's I could tell Peter was coming. I was like, I just need to try to out-motor him. I don't need to pace myself for the rest of this race. I just need to, keep the gap big enough to where I know folks are going to wear out a little bit, and they're going to start looking to who's going to chase next. And then my hope is that we have a teammate on that, either getting a free ride or sitting up and allowing, a few seconds every time someone sits up and stops chasing, which essentially ends up happening. The elastic breaks again, and I end up being able to stay away for third, not to ruin the rest of this video or anything. But stick with it because we're about to see
some zoom.
We're about to see some zoom from Sacramento.
Yeah, I mean the rest of the race was pretty much people trying to go on flyers. You know, I don't think anybody thought they could catch you, but people were just kind of trying to try moves at the end here and there.
Mm-hmm. And you always know people that aren't sprinters are going to try to do stuff late.
Or if you don't have legs, if your legs are gone, your best bet is to take a flyer rather than try to bust out an amazing sprint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see it. It stayed pretty high. I should have swapped to your video here in the editing. I mean, it's still pretty active. Dale, you mentioned before we started doing this little voiceover that you ended up just being a little delayed on some of the reactions and ended up being in the wind a little more than you wanted to, right?
Yeah, I don't know. My legs were not cooperating quite as much as they were the first two, but yeah, so I ended up finding myself with a little bit too much gap between people and stuff like that, and it was just I was overworking, and it kind of really got me toward the end here. So,
so we're final lap.
Yeah, so we're back to real motion here, full speed, not sped up, and I was, I had no dukes anymore. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just find a spot, take a flyer, and at least make it faster so it's safer, so that it's not a bunch sprint coming into the finish. And it'll be here in just a second. I'll kind of.
So this guy from Little Rock, big engine.
Yeah, he's motoring.
He kind of he ramped it up, and
I just wanted to be. I wanted to be through this turn and through the last turn. My only goal of this was to be through the turn 4 first, and as you'll see in a second, I did not make it there.
We did mention at the start we were a little worried about.
Here comes the zoom.
About zoom.
There you go.
I mean, you were going 31.
I was pushing, and like he came by me, like I was standing still, and nobody even had a chance to sprint against him because I was in the turn.
Yep.
I mean, I was pretty much blocking everybody at that point, but there wasn't anybody on his wheel anyways. He just came through, and
he timed it well.
Yeah, I mean, zoomed it.
Yep. And that's why we didn't want him in the break.
Exactly.
All right, folks, that's all we got for this one. State Crit coming up. Hopefully you will have footage up next week on that. Make sure you like and subscribe if you want to get notified of the any new videos we post. If you don't want to get notified, don't subscribe.
Yep. That's the other option.
Yeah, there you go.
Not as good of one, but yeah.
All right, that's all we got on this one. Dale, any parting words?
Yeah, appreciate you guys hanging out, listening, watching. We'll catch you guys next time. Adios.
Booze.